Terrible start. Welcome back to the Strong and Kind podcast. I'm Dave, your host, and I'm joined today by Ricky Fernandez. Ricky is the burnout coach. He's a doctor of physical therapy. He is somebody that's really passionate about helping people um, escape burnout or get out of burnout, see their own patterns, and feel good about themselves. So I'm excited to talk to Ricky. I think we're gonna have a great chat. And we were just kind of chatting before Ricky came on, or before we started, about Ricky's been sick and he's rested. And I think one of the ultimate things that in American society or culture is like rest is almost like shit on. And like I think that's a problem. Ricky, do you think that's a problem?
I think I'm contractually obligated by the coaching universe to say it is a problem. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, of course it's a problem. What do you mean? Of course. Let's put aside the number one thing that allows us to rest and rejuvenate and process information and learn and just not feel like crappy automatons. Let's just not prioritize that.
Yeah.
How does that usually work out?
Yeah, not very well. What do you think contributes to it? Like why is it just like speed of culture, speed of life, like grind mentality? What do you think?
I'm gonna be really honest.
Yeah.
I think capitalism, dude. I think it's difficult to escape the forces that like influence our life in the background. I'm reading a good book called The New Happy right now. It's
Mm-hmm.
like my favorite page on Instagram. Her name's Stephanie Harrison, I want to say. But
Okay.
she talks about this concept of like old happy and new happy, and how old happy is leading your life by kind of three main pillars. It's capitalism, individualism, and domination.
Mm-hmm.
And if you kind of peel away the layers of each one, it pretty succinctly describes our problem in today's society, which is that like we really prioritize grinding and productivity and achievement.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to do it by yourself. And if that entails you stepping on your neighbor to get ahead, that's okay. That's just
Yeah.
part of the game. And I think you can't separate this from sleep, because I don't know about you, I get plenty of Andy Elliott and Goggins videos like telling me to, wake up at a certain time of day regardless of how I'm feeling. Or
Yeah.
like Mark Wahlberg and Kevin Hart are waking up at 3:30 a.m. And I don't know how they do it, because I would be a zombie.
You know how they do it? They have a shit ton of money and they probably can go to bed early, earlier than that. Like I do think that I do believe this, that sleeping in for adults is going to bed earlier. Like, because there's no reason that if you are tired, like you can go to bed at 8:30. Like, look at like little kids, put them to bed, and they're ready to freaking go at 6 a.m. Right? Where it's like us, it's like, well, let's like watch a show, or let's like, get oh, it's time for me now. And it's like, you know what the best me time is? Just going to sleep. Right. And like honestly, Andy Elliott like seems kind of like a turd. I has actually gotten into a kind of a rabbit hole yesterday. Like he evidently was I don't this is the thing. I try not to judge people about stuff that I when I don't really know them, but it sounds like he was kind of like a shady used cars dealer, like, pre-approving people who shouldn't have been, and XYZ, right? And but like dude, there is something. I woke up at 5:30 to play basketball this morning. That was awesome. But like 5:30, when I could stay in bed and just like sleep a little bit longer and not get up and immediately just bombard myself with social media or the news, that's a different game. Like, cuz I like got up and I had something to go do that was fun and like makes me feel good, as opposed to, hey, I have to start working at 8 o'clock. I'm gonna get up at 5:30 to do more work, because that's what happens. Or like I'm on social media already, or I'm on my phone, or XYZ. It's like just sleep, you know. Let's go back to capitalism.
Okay.
Like no, you had something. Tell me what you had.
Just that, like, because you know yourself. Like,
Yeah.
I think, people like yourself, John Flagg, like, it's, I have to interact with people that know themselves well, or at least I perceive them to know themselves well. To understand what that actually means and what that boils down to, and it's like if you're getting up at 5:30 a.m. because you saw an Alex Hormozy clip where he talks about like skip the morning routine, like just start working. He also will say that like the only thing I love in my life is my work, and I
Yeah.
don't really have passions and hobbies outside of it. So if you don't know yourself and you're trying to like absorb like a sponge other people's values and other people's desires, I think that's when it gets hairy. But
Yeah.
if you're Dave and you're like, I want to have fun and I just want to like ball out, stay mobile, stay strong as I get older, hell yeah, you're getting up at 5:30 and not thinking twice about it. So that's all I wanted to mention.
No, I think, and it's like you hit on knowing yourself, and it's just an ever evolving game. Like me, who knows myself, I know myself better in 2024 than I did in 2020, especially. And like we can get into this too, because I think there's just so much. 2020 was like this great experiment of like, hey, let's just like F people up. Like, and whether it like was, true. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but like, let's just take all let's take the recipe for making humans miserable and like let's create it. And so in 2020 I was just like there were so many patterns that just got exposed even further amongst the pressures of COVID and me also being like there's something about men in their 30s. Like I think there's just something about men in our 30s, like we just like go through this phase of like, all right, what are we here for? Like you start to actually like in your 20s you're kind of like, ah, okay, it's like my 20s, I still got time. But when you hit like 30, like it just like death starts to scream in your face. It's like, all right, you're gonna freaking die. Like, do you have kids yet? Do you have a house? Do you have millions of dollars? Are you better than people? Right. And I think that happens to everybody, but it's just something about men in their 30s. But I know myself way better now, but it's been like a constant like, who are you? Like you gotta ask yourself, like, who are you on a regular basis and be okay with that, right? Um, and I don't think that's stuff that people talk about enough. Like, and just I mean, I'm a big believer in personal development, not out of like dislike for yourself, but because you love yourself. Like that's just a giant flip of the coin, right?
It is because I've been called out by my own therapist about this before of like sometimes an endless pursuit of personal development is because you don't feel like you're enough already. And it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like, oh, all right. Never thought of it that way. I just thought of it as like a habit that has constant returns on it. But you're hitting the nail on the head. Like when I think my evolving as a coach, it's like it was really tactical in the beginning. And it's like, I want to teach people how to take better care of themselves and like do habits for themselves. And what it has come to become nowadays is helping people understand who they are because so much of burnout in work and in life is doing things you don't value and doing it a lot. You're
Yeah.
working a lot at a job where you can't exercise your creativity or you can't express your playfulness or you're disciplined but in a way that you don't really appreciate the things you're getting from it. Excuse me. So a lot of work that I do with people is values based and trying to get them to understand like let's actually peel away all the stories and the beliefs that you picked up from parents and school and media and just figure out like what do you care about. Once we know those values, then we can identify those meaningful activities that allow you to embody those values. And I think that's when people start to feel less like I'm in my 30s and like it's either I'm going to run marathons or barbecue for the rest of my life, or like I'm in my 30s and like now I care about X, Y, and Z value for myself. I want to be, you know, accountable, responsible, committed, disciplined, etc. Whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
who's talking about that? No one's actually talking about that
Yeah.
conversation. Definitely not in my age by any means.
Well, how old are you? You're like 28.
Oh, 27.
Okay. I mean, I think part of it, dude, we're just this is what I've been thinking about a lot is like you have to be okay with being bored. Most of life is kind of freaking boring. Like, dude, it gets to be about 6 o'clock at night at our house, and like we've eaten dinner, and we have a dog, and like, and it's like, all right, what are you gonna do right now? And I don't really want to just like sit around and watch TV, but like honestly, that's not the end of the world if it's like just a way to relax. Especially if you like you've kind of done like your self-care. Like if you've gone for a walk, if you've exercised, and like that's okay to just chill, right? But like there's also this other side of the coin where it's like I'm actually like just actively like working on just like being bored, like just sit for a little while, um you know, being constantly stimulated, especially in like I don't really know the science of like dopamine that well, like I'm not gonna be claimed to be like a dopamine expert, but like I do think there is something about like the easy dopamine of like social media and like shows that like just kind of keep hitting you with the reward system. Like I do think there are things about that, but like the more I'm just like, yeah, just be bored. Like just, you know, and that can still mean going for a walk or and a lot of it honestly for me is just put down your work. Like stop trying to work right now. Like cuz it's not, you know, it's 6 o'clock at night. Like it's not beneficial for you. Like yeah, you can Alex Hormozy can talk about it all he wants, but you know, like it work is meaningful, and if you enjoy work that's great, but like if you don't enjoy it and you don't need to be doing it, turn it off, right? And then come back to it. Like work as a means to an end is okay. I think one of the things we're both, I think we're both physical therapists, we both got a doctorate degree. There's always this like you put something on a pedestal and then you achieve the hard thing, and then you kind of get addicted to like that pursuit, and then you get on the other side of it and it's like, well, okay, now what you just have to deal with is kind of like, not to say the boring part of like treating patients is awesome, but most people who come to see a physical therapist in like a clinic, like they're just there because they don't want to be in pain. They don't understand most of what's going on. Your job is to just try to help them get over it in a way that doesn't make them helpless, right? That can get pretty boring. It's the little things inside of that day that can be awesome and like, but it can be pretty boring. And it also kind of stops being hard, at least in the way of like, I'm gonna be honest, like strength conditioning is not that freaking hard. Like what's hard is just getting people to understand that they need to do it and be and just enjoy it to some extent. Like training, physical therapy, getting people out of pain is not that hard. Like you can make it why I think I'm ranting, sorry Ricky. Why people make it so complicated is because making it complicated is like the hard thing, and it's also like this pissing contest of knowledge, and that gives people a reward when like for the most part, I mean, I've had like, dude, sometimes this shit hurts for a long time. I've had medial elbow pain for like 4 months, and I just trust that it'll go away eventually. My Achilles on my left leg kind of hurts. I've been doing more jumping and sprinting and stuff like that, and it kind of hurts. And it's like it's probably gonna fucking go away. Sorry, I shouldn't cuss. I'm not on your podcast, you're on my podcast. It'll probably go away when it's like adapted to the stimuluses I'm providing, you know, and just chill on it. Like shit takes some time. Uh, and I think we just get bored and we got to try to fix it, or we got to like manage our time and all that stuff.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think part of this is like part of what you're saying is the goals versus values distinction. So like I think this has been a dramatic reorientation as I've gotten older, which is steering away from goals and like more so living life by values.
Yeah.
Goals are things like what you just mentioned. It's like I'm going to get my DPT and I'm going to treat people in chronic pain. And then you hit a goal and realize that the very next thought is, all right, what's the next one I'm going to hit? And you keep playing that game out with yourself until you eventually run out of goals that you're going to hit. And then that's when kind of like the existential crisis kicks in of like, I have the house, I have the job, I have the money, but I still feel kind of empty and I don't know what to do with myself. What can I fill that hole with? And so I do think this is where, again, I'm kind of beating a dead horse with this, but I think this is where values comes into play. In that, if you ever hear Shelley talk about values, she talks about how values are like a compass that
Mm-hmm.
can point you in a given direction behaviorally whenever you feel lost, whenever you feel stuck, because that's going to let you know like what's the highest ROI activity for your peace and your joy and your fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
And then the boredom thing, don't even get me started. I have a, he's almost 2 now, Nico, and he doesn't really have screen time except when we are like truly suffering as parents and it's like we need this boy to be hypnotized by Miss Rachel right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Most of his life, it's actually it makes me kind of self-conscious sometimes because it makes me realize how much I'm on my phone.
Yeah,
But
dude.
most of his life is just taking his little train sets and like magnetically attaching them and then just rolling them back and forth. Or like when we go outside, look at this dandelion, look at this twig. I'm going to go up this slide up and down 3 or 4 times. I'm going to stare at like the plane in the sky. And it's all it's I have this weird theory that it's like the reason mindfulness is so helpful is because it's essentially how a child exists through the world,
Yeah,
and
100%.
they don't have anxiety or depression because all they
Yeah,
care about is what's right there in front of them.
yeah.
But I think sometimes we're like, nah, that's really boring. Like I don't want to spend my time just existing in the moment, even though it's the best
It's
thing
the best thing.
you can
Fucking
do for
wild.
yourself.
Yeah, dude. There's isn't that like, I mean, there's a couple things I want you to spin off of there. But yeah, like what's the lesson in watching your child do that stuff? And then I'll say this because I'll inject the thing I think about. Like every like spiritual teaching that is worth a damn like tells you to be like childlike, right? Like Christianity, be childlike. Islam, be childlike. Buddhism, be childlike. Like there's aspects of that. Those spiritual teachings are to be childlike, and it's like so somebody was observing. Yeah, kids know how to behave in the world.
Hmm. I think, ooh, there's so many. I think, one of the first ones is awe. Like, I think awe exists in almost every mundane activity if you decide to pay attention to it. So,
Hmm.
like, from your morning cup of coffee to the shower that you take, to the clothes you put on, to the fragrance you put on, all of those little moments, there's something to really be appreciative about if you decide in that moment, like, dang, this feels or smells or tastes really good. That's the mindfulness component. I also think that there's the willingness to fail
Yeah,
lesson, which is really hard as an adult because we have an ego when we're an adult and we don't want to fail and we want to preserve our self image. But
yeah,
like my son still will go to a slide and instead of sitting down first, just throw himself down it. And he has to do it 5 or 6 times, tumbling like a weed before the lesson kind of kicks in that, like, oh, I should probably sit down and slide down a little more gracefully. Or like when he was first learning to walk, like the amount of times that he would fall or face plant. And no matter how painful those failures were, he still knew that he wanted to achieve the goal. He just had to get maybe a little bit more efficient or a little bit more thoughtful or a little bit more careful. And I think how much does that play out in our lives? There's still things that I talk myself out of doing because I'm scared of doing them or scared of failing, or ways that I show up and fail one time, and I'm like, that thing is not for me. I tried one freaking time. Like,
yeah,
how am I going
yeah.
to know if that hobby is really not for me if I didn't give it a shot? So, yeah, I mean, I'm noticing it now as I say it, and it's kind of cliched, but like, there really is a lot of lessons to be learned from just observing a little kid, and I think we'd be happier if we reverted back to some of those simple principles of living.
Well, and like I mean, everything you just mentioned is like so. I think one of the biggest things is that attention is a skill, right? Like, and it's not maybe it's not even a skill, but when you're little, the world is so small and it's so new to you that you can't kind of help but pay attention to it, right? And as we get older, we just start to assume. I mean, our brain is literally like a prediction machine, right? It's just trying to preserve calories, keep us safe. I also think there's a certain amount of like as we get older, like the responsibility to stay safe is like on us. Whereas like when we're little kids, it's like, well, parents will protect me, right? And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Like, I'm a 35-year-old man, and every once in a while, I'll still like have to go downstairs in like the dark, and this little subconscious thought be like, damn, like something scary could be down here, like, but and that like never really leaves, right? But like when you're little, like you trust hopefully that your parents are going to protect you. But like as the layers of complexity seemingly get put on us, your your thoughts like start to become more oriented around like what could go wrong faster, or how are other people gonna like judge me faster, right? Like, dude, do you remember when you became kind of like, do you remember like the first like self-conscious like thoughts you had? I remember being in like fourth grade and like raising my hand, and I wasn't like super chubby, but I was like kind of chubby. And I remember like I have arm fat and I don't like raising my hand. I remember that to this day. Like, so like imagine that shit propagated over 20 years, like what that does to you. And I think like self-awareness or self-consciousness is super powerful, but I mean most things are double-edged swords.
Right. You mean like the trade-off of sort of like
Like,
being yourself
yeah, you
versus,
you have to fit into the group to some extent, right? But
I
like
see what you're saying.
also you can't be afraid to be an individual, right? Like I play
So, you
basketball.
know,
Go ahead.
just like I've been thinking about that a lot too recently. And I do think, you know, obviously, if we want to be, evolutionary biologists for a second, it's like, yes, we have to fit into the group. If we don't fit into the group, we're going to be ostracized and probably more likely to die. And also, I think that there's another like sort of radical reorientation that you can live life with, which is through my authenticity, I will create a group that is right for me,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to I'm going to shift to mold whatever group I'm currently around. It's like the latter, yeah, we have to do it for survival sometimes. It's like we just want to get along with our coworkers because we don't want it to be contentious, or we have classmates and there's not that many of them, and so we're just going to shift how we act to be accepted by them. And also, I think what I've come to realize a little bit is that that runs out at a certain
Yeah.
point. It just does. It's like the authenticity deficit becomes too large, and eventually you're like, I don't really like the friends that I have, or I don't
Yeah.
really like the coworkers that I have. And so I'm not saying I'm perfect at this by any means, but a lot of work I've been doing recently is trying to lead first with the authenticity and just see if a magnetic thing happens. Because
Yeah.
I find, at least anecdotally, the people in life that I gravitate towards, that I love and care about and are like attracted to, are the ones who are most themselves, that
Yeah.
have an edge. They have something to say, they have a take, they have an opinion, and they're okay with being wrong. Like I find that naturally amazing and beautiful. And I want to be that more so myself. But it takes time. It takes a lot of unlearning. And that's
Yeah,
the hard
dude.
part.
Dude, unlearning. Dude, did you I posted like neurons make like synapsing. I
Yeah,
want to
that was
use
great.
that. I want to use that for so many things because that's really what like this is my core philosophy, or my core foundational belief is like you learn everything so you can unlearn everything. Like, and pain is really tricky. We don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but like what we can talk about like learned helplessness and stuff like that, but like what is this injury or this pain giving you that you don't even realize, like that it's like whether it be attention, whether it be love for yourself, or like loathing, because I think we also get addicted to like self-loathing. um and you know, it's not that I don't want to like address things specifically with any of my training, but like usually if you just keep going and adjust like things and sleep and eat, like things will get better, right? There's external demands to some extent for like athletes and people with really physical jobs where it makes it really hard to recover. Like when I got really like depressed and shit, it was because at least part of it was we were treating people in a really low income area and they were like field workers, and it's like this isn't gonna get freaking better. Like, without like you being able to rest and change like what you're doing from an ergonomic standpoint, or just like you just like it sucked. And like seeing people in pain where you like know like it could get better eventually, but like it's gonna take something different. Um, but like everything like when it comes to human behavior or like the group, I mean, there's a great quote and it's like nobody makes it out of high school. Like even the people you think who like love high school, like, well, they never actually left, so that's why they love it. But like the things that, like, it's not that I'm traumatized by my high school experience because it wasn't bad, but like there's also like just like girls like being rejected and like it sticks with you for a while, right? Or literally like a lot of my athletic pursuits is it really is like when I was just playing, when I just was playing, I was a good athlete. But when I started to think and worry about my performance, it went to shit, right? And like that's a pretty good analogy for a lot of things. It's like when you just play, you're going to be okay.
Totally, totally, totally.
What do you got there? Let's like riff on that. I don't know.
I have a lot there. I mean, um, I'm curious, like how you help people access that because I do, you know, I do sometimes feel like as we get older, it is easier to calcify, and so our beliefs around like who to be and how to be. Like, how many times do you talk to people who are like in their 40s, 50s, or 60s that are like, "I'm a finished product." Like, what's the use in me going to a therapist or like working with a coach? Like,
Yeah.
you got everything out of me that you're gonna get. And a small part of me is like crying internally because I'm like, please don't ever become this way, Ricky. But I think this is kind of like the skill and expertise of a coach is like, how do you move people into a state of playfulness and get them out of that state of rigidity? Because I do sometimes think that people are more vulnerable when they have to exercise playfulness. And oftentimes our brains will do this catastrophizing of like, were we to inject playfulness into work or our relationships or even ourself, just with what we do, we might be putting things at risk, right? We might be perceived unprofessionally. We might be seen as offending someone because we didn't take what they said seriously, or like we're not committed and disciplined to our goals personally. And so I think I try to at least get people to understand the costs that it has taken on them to operate with so much rigidity around their beliefs, and then maybe entertain like the possibilities of playfulness of like what could come and what could happen from that. But I'm curious to hear from you too, like, when you run into people who are like, I'm interested in change and I know I need a coach, but also like I am who I am, and like and I'm confident in who I am, even if that version of yourself is kind of getting in the way. What do you do with that?
I mean, that's like it's hard because if like you have to there has to be a dissatisfaction with stuff, right? Like and that's where the dissonance of like if you're dissatisfied with what you're getting out of life, but you're unwilling to change, like nobody can help you, right? Like if because there has to be, and it's not even it's less like going back to goals and values. Like I think values set the stage for good goals, right? Because if you don't know your values and you're just chasing other people's goals, then you're gonna just be moving from thing to thing dissatisfied, right? Where even that can still happen if you have values, but at least your values are like this is like identity versus like an achievement, and both are good, right? But I think you just need an underlying identity that you feel good about, right? And the hard part about it is at some point you have to, I mean, I think humans, in the simplest way, are pain and pleasure motivated, right? Pleasure, like, is something that pulls us. Uh, Pain is something that pushes us away. Like, and without the, I mean, honestly, dude, there's just a lot of people just have an unbelief that they can change. They don't see the they don't see the potentiality, and that is very much like an expectation effect. Like if when people have been given like criticism, they go out into the world and they look for more criticism. Like this is like the freaking weird thing, and it's the crazy part about our mind is that like if your boss just critiqued you, you're going to go look not for examples of where you're doing well. You're going to look for more things that reinforce what you've just been told, right? That's why people just go and bitch about when they get a critique, because they go bitch about it to somebody else to have somebody validate the fact that like you're getting some external source of, yeah, it's not them, it was the boss's problem, right? Or XYZ. Um, and really, like, when you learn that, it's like, all right, I got critiqued. Was it valid? Yes. Partially. No. Okay. Like, what can I do to change? Right. And I think people just don't want to do that. It's hard, dude. It hurts. It hurts for a little while. And then, but once that's how you grow too. And then that's like, dude, have you ever heard of the map of consciousness? Have you ever heard this shit?
No, what is that?
Is
Is that David
Dave,
Hawkins?
yeah, David Hawkins. So there, I do think, like, honestly, this stuff is out there, right? But he basically says that people have, there's like energy signatures to basically like values. Um I'm trying to find what they look like, but I'll pull it up here. Um so like map of consciousness. This is one thing that really helped me um when I was really low, is so basically like there's the survival paradigm, which is like shame and guilt are really like low from an energy standpoint, emotionally, right? Fear is a little bit above those things, desire is above fear, anger is above desire, pride is up at the top of kind of being in survival mode. And then the first step into like reason and rationality, and integrity is courage. Like, courage is the energy level of like, I'm going to give it a try. And then there's like a neutrality, which is like just kind of an acceptance type of thing, or acceptance is above it. But like, I do think this framework has a lot of meaning. Like, when you're happy, you have more energy, right? Like, when you're really low and like pissed off, like, you have less energy. Um and I don't know exactly, like, you have to like kind of experience some of this stuff, but like, man, when there's a lot of people out there, like, they're just living at the level of fear or grief or anger, and they can't see that there's something above that, right? And then sometimes something shocking happens and it like pulls them out of it, right? Or they get little glimpses of courage, um or they have enough pride, like, that, that will take them to the next step, right? But you just look at so many of people's problems and it's just like they're just stuck. They're just like stuck, and all you can do, dude, is be the example. Like, just be an example for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think this is like kind of the biggest question in behavior change is like how do you help people who are stuck and how do you move them from stuck to unstuck? And this is why I love the drama triangle a lot, where you're able to kind of
Yeah.
identify whether or not you're operating from like a villain mentality or like things are just happening to you. Or excuse me, that's a victim mentality. A villain mentality is when you're blaming external circumstances for why you are the way you are. And then a hero mentality where you are just assuming you have to save everybody and it's on you and it's your onus. And the sobering realization in all three of those is that none of those require a level of accountability in your own situation. They all, at the end of the day, like if you peel back the reasonings, allow you to kind of throw your hands up and be
Yeah.
like, it's not on me. It's not on me. Like my ego is safe and protected. I did not create the conditions for whatever problem I'm currently existing in. It's because of other people. It's because of this or that or the third. And I think that that moment is a moment where we need to be more comfortable sitting with it, of like, no matter how crappy our job situation is, how horrible our relationship is with our partner, how much pain we're in, how out of shape we are, if we can at least point the mirror in such a way where it's like, what's the common denominator here? It's me. I'm the one contributing to this all the time. And obviously, there's external circumstances. I'm not going to
Yeah.
act like things happen in a vacuum. But I think that's a moment where a lot of people will like kind of shriver. That's not even a word. Shrink.
Shiver. We're shivering down.
They'll shriver down because your ego's at stake and like the beliefs you have about yourself are at stake. And like you may have to contend with the fact that like you're imperfect and you make mistakes and you don't always do what you say you're going to do. And maybe you're not living life in accordance with your values. And I think there's a lot of growth to be had when we accept that it's not about getting it right. Like it's about progress.
Yeah.
We don't need to be afraid of finding ourselves in a profession that we hate. We don't need to be afraid of finding ourselves in a position where we said something stupid to our partner or we got out of shape. That like that's just life. Those things are just going to happen. There's no like ultimate negative narrative that you're a part of that's like trying to ruin your life. But unless we can kind of point the mirror at ourselves and ask ourselves, all right, these things suck, but what's the role I'm playing in this, which is likely the thing I can control? I think that's where you start to get unstuck. But you got to take the ego and kind of suspend it. And I think
Dude,
suspending that ego is tough.
I never really thought about what ego, ego just means I, like, and like, so ego just means I in the Greek, meaning like pronoun I. And like, there's a lot of philosophical things about like ego, right? But like, it's like this realization that you are contributing to your problems, even if you're just being complicit, right? Like even if you're just like, I worked on I was a nursing assistant on a floor that in the hospital that I like, and it was a shitty environment. Like it was hard, but like there was also aspects of it that I loved, right? And the thing that I'm like, all right, what can I do? Can I like I've been having this thought a lot lately too. It's like the secret of life is probably it's like that Earl Nightingale quote. It's like wherever you're at, do your best or leave. So if you are a manager at McDonald's, like do your best, create boundaries around like the fact that like if you're working like a 14-hour day at McDonald's and it's just hampering other people's development, like you need to get better at delegating and creating systems and whatever, right? That's really hard. Um, but like if you do your best in that situation, good things will happen. Either your store flourishes or it gives you the confidence to go find another job, right? Like, and I think the hard part about it is like we just don't see the avenues where we can grow. Like in our own businesses, like in my own businesses, like, all right, what can I get better at? Like, and that's like it's a hard thought because it's like when it's going well, it's like, all right, this is working, great. When it's not going so well and it has maybe worked or you want it to work, it's like, all right, what do I need to do better? Or like, how do I communicate how this is beneficial to people, right? And I think that's really hard. But like, if either way, if I had to go get a job at like Costco, let's because I was like, I don't think I could go back and work in like a normal PT job just because I'd be like, this is awful. But like if I had to go work at a Costco, I'd just be like, I'm just gonna do my best and then I'm going to, see where it takes me. And maybe it just gives me the energy and the insight to go back and try again with a different business or whatever, right?
That's hilarious. For me, it's Target. I don't know why it's not Costco. Maybe I should look
Dude,
into it.
Target's, I mean, Costco, I think is just like in general, like the best pay and the best benefits of like any major retailer, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I love Costco. It's also probably like the devil because it's just like, they're like bringing you in, selling you the hot dog. It's a great place. It's hard not to
No.
spend money there.
Yeah, right, right, right. No, it's okay. They have a good brand image, I guess. But yeah, man. What the hell were we even just talking about?
I don't know, dude. Um, I think
This been
I think it's
good.
like just doing your best, accepting that you have like, dude, doing
Oh,
your best is scary. Like that's kind of
okay.
what it comes down to, right? Like I hate this job. Is it on me to change it? Not necessarily the environment that you're in, but one of my favorite. I send the Coffee Bean. Have you ever seen that book, the Coffee Bean?
No, what is that?
I've been sending it to a lot of my clients, because it talks about how when you put a coffee bean in water, hot water, it will dissolve and make coffee. When you put a carrot in coffee, it'll soften the carrot, right? When you put an egg in coffee or not in coffee, in hot water, it will make the egg hard boiled, right? So the environment changes the the egg and the carrot, but a coffee bean changes the environment. The coffee bean changes and the environment changes, right? And So like when you show up and you do your best in an environment that maybe is shitty, like at least you're contributing to a positive environment, right? And we can get into this because there in healthcare or in like there is a lot of challenging shit, like productivity. It's not hard emotions, but like you can still do your best, and you can also just like you know say F it, like, and like just be a human. Because I think that's where a lot of it goes wrong, is like we just feel like we're machines, and being human in that type of environment takes courage.
It does. It does. And I think doing your best in a broken system requires a little bit of flexibility. Like it's not, there's no absolute best. I feel like I run into this all the time with clinicians of like trying to maintain. This is why I'm not going to lie. Some things like productivity standards and comparisonitis, like we will hold ourselves to a standard that's so unrealistic for the
Yeah,
system that we're working in that we're destined to fail from the start. And when we do fail, we're surprised and we're like, why can't I figure this out? Why can't I, despite having, children at home, not sleeping well, not taking care of myself, working in a high volume clinic, why can't I hit these productivity metrics for myself? And I'm like, because you weren't meant to from the beginning.
yeah,
Like you can only hack your environment so much until you're kind of just susceptible to the realities of it, where you're probably not going to make it there. And I do think I never advocate for people being irresponsible. Like, I don't want you to go from doing your best to totally shirking your duties at work, but also maybe getting a little bit more comfortable with good enough.
yeah,
As someone who really sucked with that for most of my life and constantly thought that like I had to do my best, meaning like in all situations, regardless of what's going on,
yeah,
that has been a really sobering realization for me. Is like sometimes doing good enough is good enough, and that's okay. And I think we're trained in healthcare. We get a little more leeway as PTs than like surgeons would or
yeah.
brain surgeons
There's
would.
also there's also like a super different standard of like how like a surgery takes like what it takes, right? Like it's like, and this is kind of good or bad, but it's like, hey, if you f this up, we're gonna be like, this is kind of one of my mental models, is like, if the productivity standard is like 80% of your work day, like you need to be working XYZ, like, and you have to see 15 people, it's like your standard for what that looks like needs to be less than perfect. If you need to perform two surgeries in a day, and like the goal is to not like discombobulate a human or potentially, kill someone, like that's when the standards need to be inexhaustibly high, and like it's a different game, right? Like, and that's the thing, like the mental flexibility to do that, like humans don't have that. Or we it's not that we don't have that. You have to train yourself to have that. And then you have to be okay when like your manager or whoever it's like, hey, you only hit 70% productivity. It's like, yeah, what do you want to do about it? Like, I did my best. I did my best. What do you want to do about it? Like, you
But
know?
do you know how many like that? I love that you said that because I think that's the kind of conversation that so many people don't even have. Like we create the most villainous, horrible scenario of what's going to happen if we don't meet our productivity expectation. And I have yet to encounter someone who's been seriously reprimanded as a result of that. Obviously, that's not the rule. I'm sure there's examples of it happening, but like when push comes to shove, that's okay. Like if you don't hit that expectation and you have to talk to your manager and you have to be honest and forthcoming about how it's not maybe realistic where you're at in life right now, that's a conversation that might need to be had, as opposed to just like suffering in silence and placing this unrealistic standard on yourself. And you're the only one experiencing the cost of that.
Yeah.
Your coworkers don't know, your manager doesn't know. This is the courageous conversation thing too.
Yeah.
I think a lot of courageous conversations in healthcare don't happen, and it's from a scarcity mindset, a fear of what would happen if I spoke up, what would happen if I were honest. And I think the classic one is, you know, if I miss this like minuscule detail in my documentation, I'm like, I might lose my license or like something really catastrophic might happen. And it's like, just because that's the exception, it doesn't mean that it's the rule. Because 99% of the time does not happen to people. But if we kind of place those constraints on ourselves, of course we're going to be overwhelmed and tired and burned out.
When like, man, every time you've ever had like a conversation you were afraid of, do you usually like come out on the other side like grateful that you had it?
Every single time with my partner.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
I
I
think
mean,
it's, yeah,
and it's
it
like
has to happen.
yeah, and it's like so it's so scary to like to go into those I'm not saying they're easy, right? But like usually, I mean, this is where do you think a lot of it is just people don't this sounds like such a douchebag thing to say, but like people just don't want to like read the book or even watch the video of like, hey, how to have a hard conversation with your boss. Like people just like I shouldn't have to do this. Like they should just cater to me, right? Or it shouldn't like I'm a physical therapist. Like why can't the environment just be conducive to me? And it's like, you know why? Because humans are lazy. And we're just trying to like make things as smooth as possible without actually doing any work. Whereas like most of it just comes from humans like bouncing ideas off of each other and engaging and like making connections. Like, cause I don't think anybody's manager is out to like get anybody. They're just they just want to have like real conversation. Like I don't know, it's hard. I've had usually it's a disconnect though. Like it's like, hey, the guy above my manager doesn't know what my manager's doing to help, right? And then my manager doesn't know what I'm doing to help and contribute. And so why these things are unrealistic. And a lot of it too is just like people like to make rules, and a lot of times those rules are stupid. Like inpatient therapy, like just the amount of rules on like how to do things, or it can be the same in outpatient, but like there's just a lot of rules that like you're just making my job way harder. And I get that some of it is in the goal of safety, but like you just can't sacrifice like part of our job is to like with patients is to challenge them, and like you making rules about XYZ gets in the way of like me actually doing my job, or me having the time to do my job, right? I don't know, I was
100%.
but
I mean, it's, we do have to wrap it up soon after this because I have to run. Um, all I was going to say is that I don't know why. I don't know why exactly. I think it's multifactorial why people don't want to do the thing or have the hard conversation. I think there's many reasons, and it just depends on the person. I will say what I've noticed is that typically what you hear from managers is that I didn't know there was a problem to begin with. No one came and spoke to me about it. Someone just submitted their 2 weeks notice, and I now have to find a new employee. And I know people are unhappy, but I don't really know why. And you talk to people on the employee level, and they have a laundry list of reasons from really minor things like, you know, the printer is constantly out of ink to really major things like I had to miss my son's recital or this doctor's appointment. And I do think that there is a gap to be bridged there if we create some system where we can have candid conversations with each other. So management can at least be aware because if we don't, this is just a general principle of scary things. Like when you don't name the scary thing, it becomes a big bad boogeyman. But if you name it and call it out, it becomes less scary. So if you're honest about, I do feel overworked, I have too much documentation, I'm exhausted, I don't know if this is a sustainable career for me. You just immediately took away all of that, all the power of those different situations. And now you're giving your manager an opportunity to potentially collaboratively solve this problem with you. And
yeah,
if it means nothing changes, guess what? You now have permission to find something else and leave because you know how that story ends if you don't do that. So,
yeah.
yeah,
So, all right, this is one thing I wanted to topic cover really quick, and this is like a big thing. Maybe we can come back. I do think we are labeling problems of physiology as mental health problems, right? If you are exhausted from like meaningless work, like not meaningless work, but work that is not exciting you anymore, like, and you don't have any time for breaks in that work or just time to recharge, like yes, there's a mental health component of that, and like this is why I don't think it's like we can really separate physiology from mental health. But like you have a physiologic problem. Like there's a reason that going for a walk at lunchtime and not working like over your lunch break is beneficial for you. And some of that's just expectations and norms and shit like that. But like getting and moving your body and like getting some energy out, getting some sunshine, like that has positive physiologic effects that affect your mood. And it's not that it's not that you're a piece of shit and depressed or anything like that, right? It's that your body needs stimulation in a different way than what you've been doing for 4 hours in the morning and what you know you're going to have to do for another 4 hours in the afternoon, right? And that's why that's why I'm so addicted to training and exercise, because it's like it makes me feel good even when I'm tired. Like I go do it and I get more energy back, right? And I think there's components of burnout where it's hard, components of burnout, components of mental health. And I'm not saying this is the only solution, but like your body, how you feel is not going to be true. And you need to go show yourself that it's not completely true. Like that you can do XYZ. That is a powerful thing for your confidence. And it's a powerful thing for your physiology because it's literally like you're literally getting out of like freeze mode, right? You're getting out of fight or flight a little bit by going and doing the thing. So sorry, that's like a can of worms to end here, but
No, please, you're good. I mean, this might be where you have to pick up at some point because this is like the I guess the not very sexy part of burnout, that it's my job to make it digestible for clients, which is ultimately stress is physiological. I do think
yeah,
it's bi-directional. I do think that your
yeah,
physiology dictates your mental health and your mental health dictates your physiology. The hormones that are released when you exercise and work out directly counteract the hormones that you release when you're stressed out at work. We're going to counteract those. So I think what I love about that is people would benefit from putting the actions ahead of the feelings. So I didn't start doing this until maybe like a year ago or so. But it's the idea that, well, I don't really want to work out because I don't feel like it, or I don't want to go for a walk because I don't feel like it. I don't want to have a date night or call a friend or family member because I don't feel like it. Which on face value is like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, don't do things that don't feel good. I get it. And also, you realize after the fact, if you engage with any of these things, you feel a lot better. You
yeah,
feel confident, you feel accomplished, you feel happy, you feel hopeful. And so, a big shift for me is, at least in the burnout recovery conversation, is prioritizing the action over the feeling. So, just do the thing, knowing that you're going to get the feeling in return. That's how we start to rebuild that habit pathway of like, oh, I get this feeling when I do this action. Maybe I want to do more of this action. And it's going to happen. You can't really separate the two. There really is no way out of burnout unless you start taking care of yourself differently. And this can obviously look like how you take care of yourself personally, self care, but also how you stand up for yourself and the expectations you have of yourself in your environment. So, like setting boundaries for yourself and protecting yourself from really predatory workplaces or family members or relationships that kind of like leech energy out of you. But you got to put different inputs to get different outputs. But I
yeah.
also think doing this with a coach is a lot easier than doing it by yourself. And it can be really overwhelming to think about all these different changes you have to make on your own.
I think the big
Kind
thing
of,
that I know you got to go so shortly, but like coaching is not like it's not a fix. It's just teaching. Like it's teaching and then helping you do so that you can reinforce things. Like I was just talking to somebody this morning. It's like, you know, why like I work with a strength and conditioning coach and I work with a nutritionist. Um Nothing they're having me do is stuff that I don't know how to do. But it's taking the thinking out of my brain and it's having somebody else put it in front of me. And so I can actually objectively look at the plan and then execute the plan. It's the same reason that, like, you have a basketball coach, right? Is because when you got five guys on the court who know how to play basketball and things are going shitty, somebody was like, all right, disrupt it. Let's take a timeout. Hey, you guys, like, you know, this is going on. Let's change it. We need to change it. Cool. Right. It's like, it's a collective system for making better decisions that ultimately lead to better outcomes, right? And that's the tricky part to convey to people, like, oh, are you just gonna like, no, I'm gonna help you solve your own problems because that's like that's me doing it for you is just gonna learned helplessness, right? So anyway, we can rant about that on another day. Pitch yourself. Where do we find you on Instagram?
It's my Shark Tank pitch.
Yeah.
Um, Ricky underscore the burnout coach on Instagram, all social medias, TikTok, all that good stuff. But yeah, come say hi. Go check out what I got going on. I think I need to just start embracing the life coach ideology. You don't have to deal with burnout to really enjoy what I talk about, what I do. You have to just maybe have a desire to live life happier, more fulfilled, and more at peace. Those are kind of the principles that overlap with burnout, and I think it's why you and I get along a lot too, honestly, because I think you have this prioritized in your brain too. So this is fun, man. I
There's
appreciate it.
nothing wrong with being a life coach, dude. People need life coaches. Like, I'm a life coach that's a strength and conditioning coach. Like, because that's the people who've stayed with me for a long time. I help them live better lives. That's all that like and I ask them good questions and I think we kind of want to categorize ourselves or specialize and like I think that's fine. But being somebody that people trust and has connection with and can help, like that's super meaningful, whatever you call it. So yeah. Appreciate you, dude.
I appreciate you too. Couldn't agree more. I remember when I used to just leave you with this. I used to like really resist someone saying I would tell someone I'm a burnout coach, and they'd be like, "Oh, like a life coach," and I'd be like, "Not really. Like kind of my own little like specialist niche." And eventually, I was like, "Wait, if that's the in that allows you to at least semi understand what I'm doing, that's okay too.
Yeah.
But also, it is life coaching, and I do think a lot of adults fall into this. I would love to talk about this at some point, but there's a little bit of a line, a threshold. It's like when you're under the threshold, you have a mental illness and you need to see a therapist.
Yeah.
When you're above the threshold, you don't have a mental illness and you don't need to see a therapist. But how many people live above that threshold and still feel overwhelmed, unfulfilled, not really sure about what they're doing in life?
Yeah.
But those aren't great reasons to see a therapist. So what do you do? I think that's where coaching fills the gap for people who are like in that blurry middle ground of like, I'm not necessarily sick, but I also don't feel particularly healthy. So
Well, and
anyway, I'll leave you with that.
even then it's like, I talk to a therapist and then I have multiple people that are mentors and coaches. Like I talk, like it helps you. It doesn't if you're goal oriented, if you care about like I'm not saying that people don't care, but like once you see how this stuff benefits you, then it's like the price you pay for it is not that much. Cause it's like, oh yeah, like it gets me to do the thing that helps me, right? And that's both from a physical and mental and just life standpoint, being more satisfied. It is like there's so many things that we let get in the way. Um, like and just yeah, people should go to therapy, but also therapy's an interesting thing. Like therapy, just going to therapy doesn't make it work. Like you still have to do shit, right? You still have to take away lessons and you still have to take away actions and like that's more what I see you trying to help people do is like implement these things. And I'm not saying that therapists don't do that either, but like I think your systems are probably built for more of that, right? So, yeah. All right, dude. Peace.
You got it, man. Take care, Dave.
You too.